Welcome to Byte-Sized Tech, where we like to take a deep dive into all the latest happenings in tech and gadgets and all that fun stuff.
And hopefully give everyone listening a little bit more insight into what's really going on behind the headlines.
Absolutely. And sometimes it feels like those headlines are changing faster than ever. Like this past week alone, AI acquisitions, space travel, new smartphones. I mean, where do we even begin?
It's a lot to keep up with, that's for sure. Maybe we should start with what has a lot of people buzzing, both literally and figuratively, AI.
Yeah, that seems to be the theme that just keeps coming up everywhere, doesn't it? And it feels like every week it's something even bigger, even faster.
Yeah.
It's gotten to the point where people are starting to compare it to Moore's Law. You know, that old saying about computer chips doubling in power every couple of years.
Right. Except with AI, it seems like things are moving even faster. Some folks are calling it AI's Moore's Law, and they might be onto something because the latest research suggests that certain AI capabilities might be doubling every 7 months.
Wow, 7 months. That is seriously fast.
Hmm.
But what exactly are we talking about doubling here? Like, what's the benchmark they're using?
So the researchers at METR, this is the group that's been doing a lot of the groundbreaking work in this area. They've been looking at how long it takes different AI models to successfully complete complex tasks.
Okay, so specific tasks. But what kind of tasks are we talking about here?
We're talking things like software engineering, cybersecurity challenges, it's those kinds of things. And they're comparing the AI's performance to how long it would take a human to do the same task.
So it's all about AI versus human in terms of speed and efficiency.
Exactly. And what they're finding is that the time it takes AI to complete these tasks is dropping dramatically and very consistently, to the point where, yeah, they're seeing this doubling pattern roughly every 7 months.
Okay, I'm starting to see why people are getting so excited, or maybe even a little bit freaked out, depending on how you look at it. But what does this actually mean in practical terms? Like, if we take this 7-month doubling time and project it out into the future, what are we looking at?
Well, things get pretty interesting pretty fast. Based on their projections, if this trend continues, we're potentially looking at AI being able to handle tasks that would take a human a full 8-hour workday in just a few years, like maybe as early as 2026.
So like all this stuff we'd normally do in a day could be done by AI in the same time frame. That's wild.
Yeah, and it gets even wilder. We're talking about things like month-long projects potentially being handled by AI by 2029. And get this, by 2031, we could be looking at AI being able to do the equivalent of a 50-week work year.
A full year's worth of work condensed down like that. That almost seems like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It does feel very futuristic, and the researchers are very clear that these are projections based on current trends, and a lot can change between now and then.
Yeah.
But the numbers are definitely attention-grabbing.
No kidding. And I know we touched on this earlier, but what's really getting people talking is that when they focus specifically on software engineering tasks, the doubling time was even shorter. It was under 3 months, which is crazy fast.
Right, and that's where things get really interesting because we're talking about real-world coding tasks, things like writing and verifying code. The researchers used a benchmark called SWE Bench Verified, which is considered a pretty robust measure of real-world coding ability.
So not just theoretical stuff, but actual code that could be used in real products. And then there's that other wrinkle where they focused on only the newest AI models, the ones from just the last couple of years.
Right, and that's where the acceleration became even more pronounced. When they narrowed their focus to the models from 2024 and 2025, the timeline for AI potentially reaching these milestones got shifted forward by like 2.5 years.
So everything we've been talking about potentially happening even sooner. It's hard not to be a little bit blown away by that kind of progress.
It is, but it's important to remember that these are specific domains. Just because an AI can code really well doesn't automatically mean it can solve every problem out there.
Yeah, good point. We always have to be careful not to overgeneralize these things. So are there any other perspectives on this whole AI's Moore's Law idea? Like, has anyone else looked at this kind of thing, but from a different angle?
Yeah, actually, there's a researcher named Temeh Besaroglu who's done similar work, but instead of looking at AI and software engineering, he focused on chess. And his analysis actually suggests much longer timelines for AI to reach certain levels of mastery in chess. We could be talking decades, not years.
Oh, so that's a pretty significant difference. But I guess it makes sense. Mastering chess, which involves a lot of strategy and long-term planning, is a very different challenge than writing code.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that both Basaroglu and Megan Kinnaman, the researcher from METR, they both seem to agree that within similar types of tasks, we are likely seeing this kind of exponential growth in AI capabilities.
So the key takeaway is that AI is advancing rapidly, but not necessarily at the same pace in every single area.
Right. We have to be careful about making sweeping statements about AI taking over the world or whatever. It's more nuanced than that.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
And even within these benchmarks that show AI doing pretty incredible things, you have to wonder how meaningful it really is. Like, I get that an AI achieving a 50% success rate on a complex task is a big deal, but how reliable does it need to be for someone to actually use it in the real world?
That's a really important point. 50% might be impressive from a research perspective, but in practical applications, you'd probably want something closer to 90 or even 99% accuracy before you'd feel comfortable relying on it.
Exactly. And then you have the whole question of diminishing returns, like, will this rapid progress continue indefinitely, or will we eventually hit a wall where it becomes exponentially harder to squeeze out further improvements?
Those are questions that researchers and developers are actively grappling with. And there's also the issue of resources. You know, the vast amounts of computing power and energy required to train these increasingly complex AI models.
Right, all those massive data centers and supercomputers running around the clock. It's not exactly environmentally friendly.
No, it's definitely something to consider. But even with all these caveats, the potential implications of this rapid AI advancement are pretty huge, especially for people in knowledge-based professions.
Right, because if AI can really start handling these complex, time-consuming tasks, it's going to change the way a lot of us work.
Absolutely. We could be looking at a future where AI becomes much more of a partner or a collaborator in the workplace. And who knows, maybe it'll free us up to focus on the more creative and strategic aspects of our jobs.
That's an optimistic way to look at it.
Yeah.
And speaking of exciting developments in AI, let's talk about something that's been generating a lot of buzz in the tech community: open source AI.
Yeah, open source is really heating up right now, especially in the AI space. And one of the projects that's been getting a lot of attention is called Allama.
Allama. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So Allama is a project backed by Y Combinator, and they've basically created an open source tool that lets you run these large language models directly on your own computer.
Wait, so instead of needing access to these giant cloud-based systems, I can run these AI models on my own laptop?
Well, maybe not your average laptop. It does require a decent amount of processing power, but the point is it makes these powerful AI capabilities much more accessible to individual developers, researchers, hobbyists, anyone who wants to experiment with cutting-edge AI.
That's pretty cool. And it seems like there's a real appetite for this kind of open source approach to AI.
Definitely. The latest report from Runa Capital, which tracks the fastest growing open source projects, ranked Allama as the #1 project based on activity on GitHub.
So it's clearly resonating with the developer community. Now, let's shift gears for a bit and talk about another topic that's always in the news: user privacy. It looks like Meta's been dealing with some legal challenges in the UK.
Right. There was a recent lawsuit brought against Meta by a human rights campaigner named Kanya O'Carroll. And her argument was basically that under UK data protection law, Meta should be required to respect her wishes not to be tracked for advertising purposes.
So it's a question of whether individuals have the right to opt out of this kind of targeted advertising, even if it's how a company like Meta makes its money.
Exactly. And in this case, it seems like Meta has agreed to O'Carroll's demands. According to reports, they've agreed not to track her for advertising.
So a win for privacy advocates in this instance. But I imagine this debate is far from over.
Definitely. This is just one case, but it could have broader implications for how tech companies handle user data and targeted advertising in the future.
It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to something that could have a pretty big impact on our everyday lives: electric vehicles. I saw that BYD, the Chinese EV maker, is making some pretty bold claims about their charging technology.
Yeah, they're saying that their new Hanel sedan can add 248 miles of range with just 5 minutes of charging.
5 minutes for 248 miles. That's insane. If it's true, it would basically eliminate one of the biggest concerns people have about EVs: range anxiety and those long charging times.
Right. It would be a major game changer. Of course, we always have to take these company claims with a grain of salt until they're independently verified. But if BYD can deliver on this, it would be a huge leap forward for the EV industry.
Absolutely. Now let's jump back to the world of AI for a bit. We talked earlier about how quickly things are progressing, and one company that seems to be right at the forefront of this is DeepSeek AI.
Right. DeepSeek is a Chinese company that's been making waves with its AI chatbot app. They've caught the attention of a lot of people in Silicon Valley and on Wall Street because their AI models seem to be very powerful, but also surprisingly affordable compared to some of the other leading models out there.
So they're kind of shaking things up in the AI world, and I know Kyle Wiggers has been following them closely.
Yeah, he's been doing some great reporting on DeepSeek and what they're up to. It's definitely a company to watch.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about some big acquisitions that have been making headlines. Starting with Google's purchase of Wiz for a whopping $32 billion, their biggest acquisition ever.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. And it really highlights how important cloud security has become.
$32 billion is a serious amount of money.
Yeah.
So what's Google's plan for Wiz?
Well, it seems like they want to position Wiz as a multi-cloud offering. So instead of just being a security tool for Google's own cloud platform, it'll be available to companies using other cloud platforms like AWS or Azure.
So they're basically trying to corner the market on cloud security.
In a way, yeah. And it's
Yeah.
interesting to note that Google reportedly offered $23 billion for Wiz last year, but the deal fell through.
So Wiz's value has gone up significantly in just a year's time. That shows how much demand there is for this kind of expertise.
Right, cloud security is a hot commodity these days. And speaking of acquisitions, Elon Musk's AI company xAI recently acquired a startup called Hotshot.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. And Hotshot specializes in AI-powered video generation.
Exactly. So it seems like xAI is getting into the video generation game, which is becoming a really competitive space. You've got OpenAI's Sora, Google's VO2, and now xAI is throwing their hat into the ring.
It's like an AI video arms race. Everyone's trying to outdo each other. Now let's talk about NVIDIA, which is kind of like the king of the hill when it comes to the hardware that powers a lot of this AI stuff. Their GTC conference just wrapped up, and there were a ton of announcements.
Yeah, GTC is always a big event, and this year was no exception. They announced 2 new personal AI supercomputers, which are basically designed to give individual researchers and developers access to the kind of computing power that was previously only available to large organizations.
So they're kind of democratizing AI in a way.
Exactly. They also announced a new foundational AI model called Groot N1, which is specifically designed for the development of humanoid robots.
Humanoid robots, so they're getting into the robotics game too.
It seems so. And then, of course, there were a bunch of announcements about new GPUs, new graphics processing units, which are the workhorses of AI development.
Right, without those powerful GPUs, all this AI magic wouldn't be possible. Okay, let's take a quick break from all the heavy AI stuff and talk about something a little more down to earth. Google just released their new Pixel 9a smartphone.
Yeah, the Pixel 9a is kind of Google's budget-friendly option in their smartphone lineup. It's got a starting price of $499, which is pretty reasonable these days.
And what are some of the highlights of the new phone?
Well, they've upgraded the display. It's a 6.3-inch Actua display, which is supposed to be about 35% brighter than the previous model, the Pixel 8a.
Okay, brighter display, that's always nice. Anything else?
They've also made a pretty significant design change. They've ditched the camera bar in the back of the phone.
Oh yeah, that camera bar was kind of a signature look for the Pixel, so it'll be interesting to see how people react to this new design.
Right. It's a bit of a gamble, but maybe it'll help the Pixel 9a stand out from the crowd.
Okay, now back to the AI world, because there's always something new and interesting popping up. I came across a story about AI being used in Minecraft, which is a video game that's hugely popular, especially with kids.
Oh yeah, this is a really cool project called MC Bench. It was actually created by a 12th grader who built a website where you can pit 2 different AIs against each other in a Minecraft building competition.
So it's like AI versus AI in the world of Minecraft.
Exactly. And the AIs are actually writing code to build these creations within the game. So it's technically a programming benchmark disguised as a fun little Minecraft competition.
That's a really clever way to make AI benchmarking more accessible and engaging. I bet kids love it.
I'm sure they do. It's a great way to get them interested in coding and AI. Now let's talk about something that's a little closer to home, literally Gmail. Google's made a pretty big change to how email search works within Gmail.
Oh yeah, I saw something about that.
Mm-hmm.
They're using AI now to prioritize search results, right?
Right. Instead of just showing your results in chronological order, Gmail now uses AI to try and figure out which emails are most relevant to you.
So it's taking into account things like how recently you've interacted with the sender, how often you open their emails, things like that.
Exactly. The goal is to help you find the information you're looking for more quickly and efficiently.
That makes sense. But what if I actually want to see my emails in chronological order? Is there a way to switch back to the old way?
Yes, thankfully they've included a toggle that lets you switch back to most recent if you prefer.
Okay, good. Because sometimes I just need to see the newest emails regardless of who they're from. So that's a welcome feature. Now let's talk about a topic that's been in the realm of sci-fi for a long time: humanoid robots in our homes. Are we actually getting any closer to that becoming a reality?
Well, it's still early days, but there are definitely some companies that are making progress in that area. For example, there's a Norwegian company called 1X that's planning to test its humanoid robot called Neo Gamma in a few hundred to a few thousand homes by the end of this year.
Wow, so that's a pretty significant real-world test. It'll be interesting to see how those robots perform in actual homes.
Right. It'll give them a lot of valuable data on how these robots interact with people in a domestic setting.
Now, for something that sounds straight out of a science fiction movie, I read about a company that's developed a computer chip made from lab-grown neurons.
Yeah, that's a company called Biological Black Box, and they're calling it BioNode. It's essentially a living computer chip made from biological neurons.
That's mind-blowing. A
Yeah.
living computer. So what's the thinking behind this?
Well, the idea is that these biological neural networks might have some unique advantages over traditional silicon-based chips. They could be more energy efficient, for example, or they might be better at certain types of tasks like pattern recognition or learning.
So it's a completely different approach to computing.
Exactly. And it's still very early days, but it's definitely an area to watch.
It sounds like it.
Uh,
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about something that Meta's been working on. They've developed a new brain-to-text interface that's pretty remarkable.
yeah, it's called Brain 2 QWERTY, and it's an interface that can decode sentences from your brain activity while you're typing.
Wait, so I'm typing on a keyboard, but it's reading my thoughts to figure out what I'm trying to say.
Well, not your thoughts exactly, but it's analyzing your brain activity to decode the words you're trying to type.
And how accurate is it?
They're claiming up to 81% accuracy, which is pretty impressive. And what's really cool is that they're doing this with non-invasive technology.
So no implants or surgery required.
Right. They're using a technique called magnetoencephalography, or MEG, which is a way to measure brain activity from outside the skull.
That's amazing. So this could potentially be a game changer for people with disabilities who have difficulty communicating.
Absolutely. It could give them a whole new way to express themselves.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
It's incredible to see all the amazing things that are happening in tech right now, especially in the world of AI.
It's really a remarkable time to be following this stuff, and it's important to remember that these technologies have the potential to change our lives in profound ways, both for better and for worse.
Right, so it's important to stay informed and engaged and to think critically about the implications of these technologies.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, thanks for joining us for another Bite-Sized Tech Deep Dive.
It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to Bite-Sized Tech. If you enjoyed the episode, like, comment, share, and subscribe for more fun tech discussions.
And don't forget to check out our website for all the latest news and updates.
We'll see you next time.